Hello, welcome to the International Wolf Center Wolf Care webinar series, where we are tonight discussing winter dynamics. And this is part of the Wolf Care webinar series. There are 14 webinars in the series, and this is our second for the year. So I'd also like to introduce Abby Keller, who is our wolf specialist and educator, who will be online being able to answer questions in the Q&A. Just as a reminder, we do not do a hand raise or chat. We'll ask you to type your questions in the Q&A, and Abby will be able to address them as we go through the presentation. We're also going to have a special guest, Autumn Pozniak, who has been here for the last 10 days. She is from St. Olaf University, and she has been using the ethogram to study the interactions and be able to provide us some data firsthand on the winter dynamics going on here at the International Wolf Center. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start the presentation. I'm going to just kind of move some things around here. So obviously, if you've not heard, we did lose Grizzer, our 17.5-year-old wolf, here on the 27th of January. And I wanted to share a little bit with you about the preliminary information that we have on his necropsy. We do not have all of the data back at this time. And I'm going to share a few more memories kind of towards the end of the presentation. But basically what we believe has happened is this circumstance with his heart. In just a little bit of a kind of a background information on your normal heart operations. Blood, again, circulates through your body. Blood circulates to the lungs and oxygenates blood to be able to pump to the rest of the body. And if we have blood that's lacking oxygen, it can impact animals' abilities to breathe. The one thing that we did find in the necropsy that was done by Dr. Christine Warheide and our wolf care team member, Krista Harrington, did the necropsy here at the Ely Clinic, did discover that there were three what are called chorda tendes or tendines in his heart had been severed. So this could have, really don't know, this could have been age related. It's always a cause and effect. Did something happen that caused these tendons to sever, or did it was just the age and that aging and those tendons decline and eventually severing cause the decline that he suffered. But basically, these chordae tendines are fibrous connections between the valve and the papillary muscles, and again they attach. If there is a severed or damaged tendon, you can see animals regurgitate, you can see backflow, you can see blood that's just not circulating properly, and it can cause acute onset congestive heart failure. And so without any other information, and again, Grizzer appeared healthy up until Tuesday night. Abby Keller had gone through about 12 hours of surveillance footage and noticed that there was some regurgitation on Tuesday night, that he was having a hard time settling down. When we did wolf care Wednesday morning is when we just thought something wasn't right, and started this process of investigation. His blood work showed nothing, nothing remarkable. His kidneys looked like they were, doing well. His liver was doing well. He was anemic, which is obviously, a concern, and kind of again points to blood flow and points to red blood cells. Nothing. His body temp was within normal range. 100.2, 101.5 is typically normal. So it was a really cold morning. So we, thought that maybe that had something to do with it, but that seemed to be a non-issue. Somebody had asked, do we show the body to the other wolves? And we actually do. This is the morning where Grayson saw the body. And Grayson got pretty excited about it. You saw a high tail, you saw a little bit of bark call. we've been watching Grayson really since Denali passed away and Grizzer had that shared fence line. We've been watching him posture up against the fence a little bit with Grizzer, and certainly when Rika was there, be a little bit more guarding of Rika interacting with Grizzer. So we definitely think that there may have been something, again, I don't know what wolves think. We can only interpret based on our experience, but his arousal was not one of separation or loss. His arousal was more of dominance, the hightail, the arousal, the bark howl, etc. Now, granted, there was a lot of things going on at that time that could cause Grayson kind of upset. The other thing I wanted to point out is that wolves can get upset in really windy conditions, and a lot of people say, "Why is that? Why does that occur?" As I was going through Grizzer's stuff, I came upon this footage. This was a birch tree coming down in the retired area, the east side. That was Shadow Malik there who witnessed that. And then we have our fair share of wolves who show up around the facility. This was taken in, from the surveillance, from the ring camera. We have surveillance, and then we also have some ring cameras for security. And this was a wild wolf trying to figure out how to get into our freezer. So just because he's bark howling doesn't necessarily mean that there's anxiety or something, but usually wind will make them nervous, probably because trees coming down, and then wild wolves as well. The other thing that I wanted to share is we do use a lot of dogs here. This is Oscar, and Oscar we adopted from the Humane Society in 2011 when Grizzer first was moved into retirement. He was relatively young as retirement. He moved in because his sister was euthanized, and Grizzer had some conflict with Denali. So we brought Oscar in, and Oscar is was a tremendous companion, is still alive. He's now a goat herder, but he was a tremendous benefit to the wolves and actually became part of the pack. Of course, dogs through domestication repetitively bark, whereas wolves only bark for threat display and howl. The difference between a domesticated dog and a pure wolf is in communication, but it certainly was in spirit a team member and a pack member to Grizzer. And we did see, and we continue to use dogs throughout all of the wolves' lives. And so whether it be as aging animals or whether it be as young pups. Grizzer had recently had the opportunity to meet Abby's dogs, Ozzy and Moose, and Grizzer really enjoyed a lot of that opportunity. He was coming in the building, and this was just the 24th of January. You could see again him coming in the building and having that opportunity every morning that it was cold. We'd bring him in, and there's Moose pup. Moose is a fabulous dog to be around wolves. He's not as barky as Oscar was, and has done quite well for improving the animal's condition here. So I got this question from Keith. I thought I'd throw it in case I'd forget. Keith had asked, how unique was Grizzer's personality? Could others you have known lived his circumstances with such aplomb, which aplomb means self-confidence or assurance, especially in a demanding situation. And I would say, Keith, that there was another wolf that fit that model, and his name was Jedediah. Jedediah was a wolf of the 89 litter. Jedediah, Balazar, Basha, and Raisa were members of that 89 litter. And this is Jedediah right here, self-confident, always into something. At that time, I used Maggie, my German Shepherd, and did live with us. This was quite a bit of a different pack because I lived at the center in a tent with them. And so Maggie was my dog who happened to live with me. And in the wintertime, they would come to my house. And we certainly wanted to have a dog who was well socialized to the wolves. So she was in with them until the first spring of right before the wolf Basha turned 2, and then they got into a little bit of a female dominance row, a part of the winter dynamics of wolves. And you can see here Jedediah and a heightened what we call hackles 1, 2, 3, 4 hackle all the way from his neck to his tail. Arousal with a T1 tail, and Balazar with a T2, kind of a straight, more, some people say it's the attack tail versus the arousal tail, but that's part of the winter dynamics that we've experienced. And so, like I said, I wanted to share some clips of the past before Autumn gives you some information about the future. So dominance isn't just about winter, and dominance isn't just about adults. Wolf pups inherently know how to dominate. This is Axel and Grayson as young pups. You can clearly see the tail posturing. Hopefully you can tell the difference between Axel and Grayson. This is Axel on the left, Grayson on the right. If you ever have troubles trying to tell them apart, Grayson typically had more weepy eyes. He typically had some more issues with, I don't know if it would be best to say anxiety or stress. Not really hard, really kind of hard to really distinguish what causes an animal to kind of have those issues. Some other challenges that we had is that we know that winter dominance can sometimes have some redirected aggression, especially to the lower pack members, such as the Omegas. In this case, this was the pack in the year 2001, going into 2002, where Lakota was the Omega pack member. She received a lot of dominance from the Arctics, and that was Shadow on the left and Malik on the right. And they're just still yearlings. They're not fully mature yet. By the time they reached 2 years of age, they systematically deposed the entire 1993 litter. One thing that was a little bit challenging in that litter was that there was such an age difference between the Arctics coming in the year 2000 and the 1993 litter. 7 years difference before they were adopted meant that at 9 years of age, older wolves were having to deal with these younger, more powerful animals trying to take over rank. So it was real problematic. And certainly one of the reasons that's a driving force right now for us to try to get pups while Axel and Grayson are 6-year-olds rather than waiting a year until they were 7. So it is a challenge, and there's no doubt that sometimes winter dynamics can be problematic. One thing that we do know about the Omegas, and we learned that with Lakota, we tried to pull Lakota out, thinking that was best for her safety. Lakota's challenges were problematic in that she didn't want to be separated from her pack. It was a circumstance where the social dynamics and the social interactions of that group overrode her anxiety about being at the bottom of the rank order. So it's really challenging for us to really kind of understand that as humans. So we try, since that litter, to work really hard with distractions to be able to, when winter happens and things get a little bit intense, you'll see us out there with, right now, deer hides seem to be the best winter distraction for Rika. You'll see us handing out, even just, right before I started this webinar, I was in the enclosure handing out frozen little pucks. There's whatever reason, they like to gnaw on frozen things when it's below zero. But giving them opportunities to have those, those not only are getting food resources, but those distractions to kind of dissipate a little bit of anxiety that might happen in some of this colder weather. And sometimes you just deal with personalities that are more dominant. And this is Maya, Grizzer's sister, on top of Misa, as well as on top of Grizzer, in a posture of dominance. So when we talk about winter dominance and we talk about winter dynamics, we're always looking at the tail postures. How are they holding their tails? Are there hackles? And I think it's important to recognize that hackles don't always, a lot of times right now, Rika looks like she has hackles. Juvenile hair doesn't settle down very well. So there's a lot of hair that looks like hackles. That's not on Rika. Granted, there are some times I think I've seen her hackles, but we usually wait till they're adults to be able to identify that. Sometimes winter dominance can be more subtle. It can just be slow, deliberate movements, posturing, doing what are called T blocks, where this is Malik on the right, Shadow on the left. Shadow was the more dominant. This was already when they're in retirement. A little bit of sniffing of the anal scent glands, of the precaudal tail gland, averting gaze, not wanting to have a direct eye contact, avoiding conflict in that manner. So you see the hackles now lifting, and you see that slow, deliberate walk to block Shadow as a little bit of testing. I mean, testing is what wolves do. They do it every day. Sometimes, though, testing is done by younger animals with a lot of tolerances from the dominants. And this is Aiden, who is the pack leader, being tested by Luna and Bolts. And at some point, pack leaders just realize this is just young animals. This is not something to be concerned with. And I think it's really important to distinguish that there's a difference between dominance and domineering. Now, no doubt hormones play a huge role. Androgens are produced by the testes, ovaries, and adrenal glands. And even though we spay and neuter here, where we take out testosterone from the neutering, you still have adrenal glands that are providing a little bit of this stimulus in the winter hormones. And so again, adrenal glands are the small glands located just forward of the kidneys. They have a function. They work in conjunction primarily with the pituitary gland. They help control the body's reactions to stress, whether it be psychological or physical. They also help regulate digestion. They help immune systems. They help energy usage. All those things kind of come into play. So this was the winter of 2012 and going into 2013 when Luna and Bolts were just juveniles going into maturity or going into their first year of age. Luna being the only female that was adopted at that particular time, and the only female in the exhibit, automatically became the dominant female. Bolts being a male, he's got to figure out his way in the pack. And so again, hormone mounting, again, we neuter. They still will have those adrenal gland kind of focus that makes them a little bit more intense in that winter dominance. The good thing I think about pack leaders, Aiden took it in stride. This is not when you push it. This is not really, something that is of concern. Keep in mind, though, that in the adrenal gland, especially in the center of the adrenal gland, we do have a secretion of that is increased during times of acute or severe stress. It's kind of the fight or flight mechanism that is part of the endocrine system of wolves. And I think you'll see, especially in this circumstance where Denali's got a little bit of a tucked tail, a little bit of hackles, and again, seeing that influence of Luna, who is now mature, and now the dominant female who is assisting Aiden with that dominance, can create a more adrenal response from the wolf that's being tested. And so in that particular case, it was Denali didn't care much for having Luna, who's like, 3/4 of his size, showing him dominance. And you can see that in the end result of the tucked tail as being the behavior that we pick on or that we identify. A couple of other things that typically happen, and this is Grizzer in his young days, Grizzer 500, is that there are going to be a lot more chase scenes going on in winter dynamics, chasing each other, chasing, in this case, Grizzer was by himself, but he would chase along the fence line. Pretty spry guy there. This is why we nicknamed the Grizzer 500. He certainly was good at it. And you will see that kind of behavior, play itself out probably more in the wintertime than you will in the summertime, just because, they love snow. They like cold. They like activity. At that time, he could not have a shared fence, but because where the gate had to be closed with the exhibit pack, because there was a little bit too much tension going on with the pack. Other winter dynamic things that you might see is snow plows, face wipes. When they're eating a carcass and there's a little bit of blood on their face, they might wipe their face in the snow. Grizzer was famous for doing a pretty good snow plow when he was showing or finished with a carcass. The other thing too is as animals age, they get lighter in coloration. Grizzer used to have a pretty dark coat. And as he aged, that coat got lighter and lighter, and certainly to the point where he appeared almost white towards the end. The other thing that happens in winter is wolves are extremely helpful with tools. So those of you who watch Rika just in the last couple of days, as I think it was Tuesday, Abby and I cleaned off the pen. She's not the first wolf to have a little predatory drive with the motion of the rake. Grizzer was that way as well. So you see the predatory drive, that stiff leg jump. Here jumping as we're prying hay, certainly helping is not a problem for us. We certainly have the ability to, work around her, making sure that she doesn't get her tongue stuck. And one thing that I think was a Q&A question you're asked, now that we have the retirement area closed off, or there's no wolf in retirement, what will we do with it? Well, we do need to do maintenance work where the entire pack needs to be drawn off. So we're just starting to condition them to come into the east side. This is the top of the den, a lot of snow. And certainly we are in a circumstance where we need to do a little bit of repairs or improvements, I should say, things that we didn't do while Grizzer was alive, because we wanted to make sure that we, didn't cause him a lot of anxiety by having contractors there. But we definitely need to fix that roof on the way that snow is sliding off the roof on the den. We need to get a better couple of different camera setups back there. But, if we get pups, the pups will be spending some time in that pack holding area as well. That is typically where the pup nursery is. So with that, like I said, I just wanted to share with you some history of wolf dynamics. And now I would like to introduce Autumn Posniak, again from St. Olaf's College University, that she has been here for the last 10 days helping us observe these guys. And this is Rika and Grayson. And we're hoping to try to see what kind of behaviors she has witnessed, and whether we are seeing some pair bonding between these individuals. And again, pair bonding is typically means synchronized behaviors. It could be parallel gaits, could be parallel rests, it could be sleeping in close proximity. Those are the things that we're kind of watching for. So I'm going to stop sharing, and I'm going to hand it off to Autumn. And hopefully we can get that glimpse of pack life.
All right, everyone. Let me get my presentation and presentation mode. There we go. Perfect. Okay, so again, hello, my name is Autumn, and I'm very excited to talk with you all today and share some cool information about winter wolf behavior and how it relates to the ambassador wolves here at the International Wolf Center. So for the past week and a half, about 10 days, I've been observing Rika, Axel, and Grayson, trying to get an idea of the dynamics of this pack and how they're changing, and what the winter season has to do with changes that are being seen. So the big question here is, what does change in the winter? How do wolves act differently, and why do they act differently? So a quick overview, during the winter, a lot of wolf behaviors become heightened. In February, female wolves go into estrus, and they're ready to pair bond with the male wolf and form a breeding pair. And this often leads to an increased amount of dominance-related aggression, as well as compete for breeding rights. You may see tensely charged standoffs between wolves, often along with higher, more alert tail positions, and sometimes raised hackles. There might also be more growling or snapping, and then chin rests are also a good sign of dominant behavior as well. But despite these conflicts that are more often observed between male wolves, it's ultimately the female who chooses who she's going to bond with and make up the second half of that breeding pair, as she should. And then also as, a lot more social behavior can be observed as well. The pair bonding behavior that's observed, like Lori was saying, is sleeping in close proximity to each other, parallel walking, or sharing food. So how does all this relate to the ambassador wolves here at the International Wolf Center? Firstly, at the center, all wolves are spayed and neutered, so there's actually no chance of Rika and another wolf having pups. But she and either Grayson or Axel can still form a pair bond, and all those things that typically affect wolves in winter still affect the behavior of the wolves here. I first want to delve a little into each individual's behavior and then kind of see how that fits together with the whole pack dynamic. Of course, though, all these interpretations are subjective, and it can be very hard to come to a concrete conclusion about what's going on, especially when behaviors are always changing. So the best we can do is take what we see and interpret that the best we can. Firstly, Rika continues to gain confidence. She's only 8 months old right now and definitely has a subordinate status among the other older wolves. But she keeps growing more sure of herself and her interactions with the other pack members. She often initiates play with the two boys, inviting chase with a play bow. And sometimes she'll even snap at their tails or sneak up on them, which is always fun to see. She also has no problem guarding her food from the other wolves, and she isn't afraid to take some time to herself, sleeping alone, investigating the enclosure, and that independence is great to see as well. She also loves chasing ravens, and she'll often keep herself entertained when Axel and Grayson don't feel up to playing. Here in this picture, you can see Rika guarding her food from Axel. And it is usually these two who end up competing for food. Grayson kind of stays out of it a bit more. As for Axel, he's pretty direct. Axel's often the instigator of more dominant, aggressive related behaviors like face-offs or T formations with Grayson when he sort of blocks him and makes himself stand tall. And he'll often snap or growl at the others to protect his food or sort of scold Rika when she gets a little too rambunctious. Axel also certainly exercises ritualized dominance behaviors over Rika, just those daily reoccurrent behaviors like pinning and snapping. And Axel likes his independence as well, and he'll often patrol the perimeter of the enclosure on his own. Here you can see one of those interactions of that threatening behavior. Rika sort of walked in on Axel and Grayson having a moment, and you can see both Rika and Grayson's tail in a lower T4 position. As for Grayson, he's usually been the mostly back wolf of the three, more passive than Axel, and much more tolerant to Rika's playful antics. But lately we've got to see Grayson kind of take some initiative and hold his own in interactions with his brother, and even instigate some of his own dominant interactions with him. So he's been approaching Axel with higher tail positions and displaying some threatening behavior like lip curling or growling, even barking on occasion. Or once he even snapped at Axel when he was threatening Rika. So Grayson's behavior did take a visible shift after the passing of Grizzer. Grayson is pretty vocal in general, but lately he and Axel both have been howling and bark howling a lot more, which can be an indicator of distress. It's also around the time Grayson got a lot more finicky in general and defensive, so it's hard to pinpoint whether these more forward interactions seen by Grayson are due to duress, an increase of hormones and confidence, or maybe a mixture of both. And then in this picture, you can see Rika rolling around and Grayson sort of standing over her with his tail in one of those more dominant T2 positions. So all of these behaviors play into the larger scope of the pack dynamic. And it's been very interesting to see how the wolves are interacting with each other and what they might indicate about what's happening in the pack as a whole. So first of all, despite the increased altercations between Axel and Grayson, they still have much brotherly love for each other, often sleeping close together and chasing one another without Rika when she's not driving the play. Here you can see one of those heated interactions between Grayson and Axel as they both display more threatening behavior, curling their lips back to reveal their teeth. As for Rika, she has healthy interactions with both males. She definitely used to be more hesitant around Axel, but she'll still play with him. She really likes to snatch at his tail, much to his annoyance. But ultimately, Rika is definitely more comfortable with Grayson. Ever since she was a pup, the two have been pretty close, as Grayson is quite tolerant of Rika, and that still continues now. Sometimes he'll even show submission towards her, but he still has his limits as well. So she often seeks Grayson for social interactions, and lately the two have been displaying some especially interesting exchanges. So the two often sleep extremely close together, and there have been some instances of the two being nose to nose, or even more wildly, Rika trying to ride up on Grayson when she was initiating play, which is like, it can be a sign of dominance or just more close behavior in general. Here, you see Rika initiating an inhibited bite to Grayson, which doesn't have enough pressure to actually cause pain. And as you can see, Grayson is pretty indifferent to it. Also here is a clip of that interaction of Rika trying to mount Grayson, which he wasn't very thrilled about, but the two later rested together not too long after, so that's a good sign. You can see Rika wagging her tail and sort of mouthing at Grayson. There's a play bow. You can see Grayson kind of snapping at her and just telling her like, hey, that's enough. And then Axel being Axel, he has definitely exerted dominance over Rika and sort of continues to remind her of her subordinate status to him. He displayed behavior of trying to get closer to Rika though. He attempted to mount her at one point, and there was another time when he tried to sleep so close to her that he nearly sat on her, which she quickly snapped him off. So I'm not entirely sure how reciprocative Rika is of these behaviors on her end. And here in this picture, you can see Axel resting his chin on Rika after that attempt to mount her, which is his way of kind of saying, you know, I'm still in charge here. So as for what all of this means for the pack, it's still hard to say. Behavior dynamics are always fluctuating and things can change in just a day. What I can say with certainty is that Rika, Axel, and Grayson are healthy wolves with healthy interactions with each other. They rest together and play together daily. And even though the winter season has stirred up more heated exchanges, these behaviors are completely natural. So with all of that said, I thank you all so much for letting me share this with you. And that's all I have for you.
Thank you, Autumn. Now Abby is going to be able to field some questions. If anyone has questions, go ahead and type them into the Q&A and Abby can address them. It's kind of fun for me to watch what Autumn has interpreted because as I go back in the old footage and look at, you know, you talk about Grayson's tolerance, and I think about Aiden's tolerance, and think about Shadow's tolerance, and I think about, you know, Luna just trying to sit on Denali's head when she was trying to be the dominant female. There's a lot of simulators there. There's a lot of wolf pack discussions there. So we'll go ahead. Any questions for Autumn?
I did have one question for you, Lori.
Oh, sure.
Someone was asking about Rika's weight. I answered it in the chat, but if you want to kind of elaborate, kind of her most recent weigh-in.
Sure. So she was 74.6, not as much gain as we had hoped, but we had a tough spell there in December. She was gaining, quite well. She was on track to hopefully hit 75 pounds by her 8th month birthday. And we had a little bit of a stall because of extremely cold weather, extremely active Rika, and that combination create a little bit of a challenge. So we have increased some fat in her diet, and we're happy to report that in the last week, she's gained 1.4 pounds. So we are on the right track. We just need winter and the polar vortex to go back north, and hopefully be able to continue to see that kind of growth. So she's on track. She's again a little bit. A lot of people think that she's still a little bit shorter than the Arctics. Well, she is, because that's that height. We don't expect to see that till about a year of age. So I hope we were weighing her once a month. Well, we started January was our, we went every week, and then in January we went once a month, and now because of the cold, we'll go back to weighing her once a week.
Awesome. And kind of related to that, we had a couple of questions about the cold and specifically like big winter storms. Do they use their dens during the storms? Is the cold affecting their health? Anything like that?
No, they have dens available, and actually Abby crawls in. I'm too old to crawl in the den, but Abby crawled in and was quite comfortable in there. Fresh hay was put in there. Dens are typically, even in the wild, dens are typically used to whelp their pups, to nurse their pups. Even after the pups get to the part where they're weaned, they move out of their dens and they go to rendezvous sites, and they never really den. So wolves in the wild doing the same thing. Here, because we have compacted snow, we do keep hay in the front of the exhibit as well as on the pump house, so that because compacted snow loses its insulating value, they choose to use that. Reka has a medical pen. I'd say what I see them retreat from is not the cold, but the wind. Wind makes them nervous. As you saw earlier, trees falling on their heads, just inability to know where your sense of smell, where smells are swirling around with the wind. I think that makes them all nervous. So so that's the only time that I see them really try to find some kind of some kind of a I can't think of the word, sorry, shelter. That's what I was looking for. So.
All right, awesome. Looks like we have a question about Axel and Rika, if they ever play together, and how kind of Grayson fits in with that as well.
Autumn, why don't you go ahead and take that one?
So from what I've seen, Rika will definitely still approach Axel and play with him, especially when Grayson's being a little more lazy. Grayson likes to rest on the pump house a lot. But I would definitely say she gets more intimidated by Axel quickly. He will snap at her if she takes things a little too far. And then ultimately all three play together a lot, and it's often Rika instigating chase and then later being chased by both males.
And in Rika's defense, Axel was a tail puller as well. So, what comes around goes around, as they say. Just tonight at the 3 o'clock check, we go in at 3 o'clock, make sure that, the hay is good, the water's functioning. And lately, Rika's been trying to go between people's legs to grab Axel's tail. Not a behavior I'm all that thrilled with, to be in the middle of it, but Axel, like I said, had similar behaviors when he was a pup.
All right. I have another question that could go to Autumn. Where did it go? Oh, is Rika showing any aggressive behavior towards the brothers, more than just kind of her, mischievous pup nature?
I would wouldn't say that I've seen very aggressive behavior. I've seen defensive behavior when it comes to food, usually directed at Axel, but as far as I've seen, I don't think so. But she's definitely gaining confidence, so maybe in the future she'll be more initiative with those kind of interactions.
Yeah, Abby and I can probably attest to the fact that when she's frustrated, she takes it out on us, Abby and I, more than anybody. Yeah, we struggle a little bit with some frustration. We knew that when we brought her in. She was a singleton. She didn't have the camaraderie of a litter mate. She was just, introduced to a pair of adults who were stern, and took her a while to get used to it. We don't see her take out frustration on the wolves. We see her, and probably her strongest bond was with the caretakers. And so that's where we see her, that's frustration. Once we can figure out what's causing it, and we can distract from it, she does quite well. She's not by any means a challenging pup from that standpoint. I personally, with the pups that I've raised here, I feel like she's got nothing on Grizzer. I mean, Grizzer was a challenging pup, and I keep reminding people of that. Is like, you got to back up the train a little bit and remember, we had a boy here who, when he didn't like something, would jump up, grab you underneath the armpit with his lower canine and just bite into your bicep. That was Grizzer, and you had to listen. And Rika's nothing like that yet.
Yet, yeah. Can you talk a little bit about the difference between dominance and discipline?
Sure. Dominance is and actually there's a real important distinction between dominance and domineering. Dominance, to me, is ritualized. It starts with the young pups. I mean, it's posturing. Who's going to get the food that mom brings and regurgitates? It's ingrained in their brain to be higher ranking, because you have such high mortality as pups. Somewhere in the survival mechanism, dominance was about food resources. It was about mating rituals. It was about survival. It was about being the one that's left standing in a very, very harsh winter. So I think it's so integrally tied to all of their functions as a pack. Domineering is probably a little bit more humanistic. We have a tendency to think, okay, I'm more important than you, so you have to listen to everything I say. And I don't see that in the dominant animals that I've worked with. As Aiden showed you, there's tolerances. As Grayson shows you, there's tolerances. So ritualized dominance can be, direct eye contact, chin rests. It can be T-blocks. It can be all these things. Domineering and dominance oftentimes is frustrated. Sometimes it can be triggered by external stresses. So when I see ritualized dominance, it can be noisy. It's just posturing. To me, the worst challenging fights that I've ever had here have been dead silent. And Grizzer taking out Malik was one of them. Malik was retired because of Grizzer's dominance. And I think that was a wolf who wanted to be higher ranking. And remember, in captivity, it's not a natural setting. You don't have the right to leave, and you don't have the right to disperse. In the wild, these kind of things are going on. You look at some of the history of Yellowstone, you've got inter-pack strife. You've got pack within the pack, or strife within the pack, yet somebody could pick up and leave or gets driven out. You don't have that in captivity. So I think that's when I see some of that that intense aggression that's not ritualized dominance, that's intensity attack, more what the human calls fighting. And so I always say, when when they're posturing, that's healthy. I mean, that's everybody figuring it out. But obviously Rika's in the mix now. Rika's changing Grayson's confidence. And no doubt, I do believe Grizzer's passing it made an impression on Grayson, to the point where I maybe Grayson still saw Grizzer as a leader. I'm not sure what he thinks, but boy, he had a high tail, and he postured and he vocalized. Um, and I think I've seen a change in him since Grizzly's passing, and that's only been since the 27th. So we've got a lot of winter left to be able to monitor that.
Yeah, I would agree with you. Even how they act in the retirement area when we let them in every once in a while, you can definitely see, you know, their tails are high. They're feeling pretty good about themselves. Whereas before it was a lot more kind of timid, a lot more kind of cautious of that newer area. So yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and I saw raised leg urinations from Grayson and Scat. We got our fecal samples because they were just pooping all over the place. And they had never been, I forgot that they had never been in the back habitat, because that was always Grizzer's space. If the boys had to come over for work, you know, they went to the east side, Grizzer was in the back habitat. I mean, they were beside themselves when they were in the back habitat or the transition area. They thought that was the coolest thing on earth. So, so that's helped the transition by giving them that opportunity. And we need it for management. We definitely need them to be comfortable in that space. We've got some roof work coming up that's we need to move the boys out.
Kind of speaking a little bit about, you know, Grizzer's passing. What was Rika's reaction? You know, she saw him through the fence, you know, as we always do. How did she kind of react to that?
Well, we brought the body over, which we typically do. And Rika was right next to she was in the chute next to him. You know, she's a young pup. I mean, she didn't know what to do. Obviously, the one wolf she has the strongest bond with is hightailing it and bark howling and just creating a ruckus. I mean, she just didn't really know. She sniffed Grizzer. Whether she looked for him when she went in because she had more time in the pack holding area sharing a fence with him is hard to say. You know, I think she probably did, because she always would run over there and be face to face with him, and, you know, and put her paw in his face. And, but she's young, and like I said, I don't think it means as much to her as a juvenile as it would have been if she were older. But certainly we wanted her to be involved in that process as well. You know, I don't know what they think. I mean, some people think it might be ridiculous to show a body to other pack members, but you know what? They know more than we think they know.
Sure. We have a question from Sunny. What's Axel's reaction going to be to, you know, if Grayson ends up kind of being that pack leader with Rika? How do you think Axel is going to kind of respond to that or handle it, I guess?
Well, Axel never really liked leadership. He's pretty quick. I mean, if you watch when there's chaos here, Grayson meets it head on, and Axel, you know, he doesn't deal well with it. So Axel's a lot like Denali. You know, he's going to posture. He can control food resources pretty well, but when it comes right down to it, he doesn't want to be in charge. I think he might have some excitement. Axel has always been excitable. If you go back to any of our presentations that we did when we first met them, Grayson would sit back and watch. Axel would get himself in the middle of things and then panic because he was in trouble. I'm pretty sure that that's about the same scenario that I'm watching right now.
Great. Let me see here.
I think we'll just take a couple more. I do want to, I did have some memories for Grizzer I wanted to share with people. So we have a few more I could answer.
Sure. Any updates with the 2022 pup acquisition?
No, it is the start of the breeding season. We are still working on permits. We really just don't have any information. And really, I think what's important caused a lot of anxiety last year. We just really, it's best to just say, if it happens, it'll happen. And we'll notify you when they're on site. There's just so many variables and so many things that can go wrong, and not even just wrong. pups, whelping is not, I mean, you can hope that a breeding season produces a litter, but there's a lot of things that might have issues. So so I would say talk to us in May. That's the best I can say.
Yeah. Yeah. It looks like here's another one. Did you recognize any agitated displays when wild wolves came near the enclosure, and does that happen often?
Yes, I have the most intense bark howling that I thought was going to blow the explore.org camera from Grayson. And it was the night before I came into wolf care, and there's a wolf right in the parking lot, and I chased him up the hill. And then I kind of always look at the surveillance cameras. It's a standard thing that we do, is go to the explore.org and look at the chat, look at people who have posted things. And wow, holy cow, Grizzly was pretty upset about that. So it happens. We have a double fence, so the wolves cannot be face to face. I'm not worried about risk of some of exposure of diseases, but certainly gets them uptight. But what was surprising to me, Axel had very little response. Rika just kind of laid there. I think they already know that he's going to protect them from whatever threats occur. He's pretty good at it.
All right. Well, I think that's most of the questions that we have. So if you wanted to go into Grizzer's thing,
Sure.
then I think that sounds good.
Well, I wanted to share one thing first, and hopefully some of you may be members, some of you may be donors. If you're a $75 member or donor, you get what's called a rendezvous. And part of the rendezvous is something Abby and I and Carissa Winter, our web spec, put together. And in the rendezvous, we have the Gone But Not Forgotten series, where we pick one word about that particular wolf who has passed on in our facility. And our most recent rendezvous had Denali join, and we picked gregarious. So obviously, as part of my thought process, as I processed all the video and do the reports to the USDA, reports to the DNR, to look at the necropsy reports, in the back of my mind is the communication to members, because members are what make this organization, and members and donors. And I was thinking about Grizzer, and I was thinking about, as I was writing things about Grizzer, I picked the word prodigious as his word that will join him in the Gone But Not Forgotten rendezvous. And prodigious basically means remarkably or impressively great in extent, size, or degree. And certainly, as the oldest wolf that we have here, I wanted to make sure that people really appreciated who he was. And I want to share this last piece here. And I want to let you know that I pre-recorded this because it was a challenge to do. I wanted to share with you what we do here is important for us to learn, so that the next generation, when Abby fast forward 16 years and is in that same boat with Rika, I want to make sure everybody understands the decisions that we make, we don't take lightly. I want to give you a disclaimer. I do record some surveillance video that shows the vet exam and the moment that I made the decision to offer him the best gift that I could, which was peace and no pain. I'll stop it before I get to that point if you choose to not see that. It was important for me that people know these animals, we owe them the best management that we can.
Memories of Grizzer. We want to thank all of the people who have emailed and told us stories about how Grizzer has impacted their life. And certainly there's no doubt we all carry a piece of Grizzer with us. And this is Shanna Barber Meyer's backpack in Hawaii at her new job, and Grizzer is there with her. So we wanted to share some of the things that you may not know about Grizzer. When he was a young pup, he and his sister, or his cousin Nisa, did not like to come out for programs. They used to hide in the den, and a dug den, and growl if we tried to get him out to do their daily programs. He was definitely described as an easygoing, relaxed stoic sometimes, loving bouts of fun, a lot of energy. Certainly, we saw that as he matured into a young adult. This is Nisa and Grizzer on the rock, and that's Malik. Malik was the second ranking male at the time. As an adult, Grizzer is just a pup here, trying to figure out his way in the pack. And we have many, many memories of Grizzer rolling and falling and just having a good time. That body, that big body of his, just going where it needed to go, and pretty much was going with the flow. So we saw that as a young pup, and then we saw the potential that wolves have as they start to try to figure out their way in the pack. Initially, Grizzer dealt with 2 adult males who are already established in their roles, with Shadow being dominant, Malik being subordinate. He's a young male. He's trying to figure out, where do I fit? That's just a natural communication amongst wolves, and we see that with Shadow and Malik, and a lot of these ritualized dominances are ways to avoid more fighting. And Grizzer had a personality, though. He was nicknamed Grizzbang because he liked to grab on chains and slap on gates and bring everyone's attention to him. He did try to be a little bit more dominant. He didn't do well with Shadow, so he decided to take the second ranking role over Malik. And his intensity was something that was not to be denied. And certainly we also know him as Uncle Buck, this wolf that would roll over and let Aiden and Denali climb on them, but later on in life, having some strife with Denali over the opportunity for the top-ranking position. But he didn't hold a grudge. He welcomed Denali into retirement years later, and they were pals, as if nothing happened. And we thought retirement would be easy for him. The life of retirement from our 93 litter was relaxing in the den boxes. Grizzer spent 1 day with a den box and decided to destroy it. So a lot of our world was building concrete dens when Grizzer came into retirement. We also know that Grizzer was the only wolf that tangled with an eagle in retirement. Normally eagles get into the exhibit and they can get out of the enclosure pretty well, but when they land in retirement, tight quarters, hard to get the lift necessary to get out of the enclosure. We ended up taking him down to the Raptor Center. Unfortunately, he did not survive his injuries. The interesting thing about that day for me, as my grandson was part of that recovery, Rusty Wetzel, myself, and my grandson were there getting the eagle ready to the Raptor Center. And when my 18-year-old grandson had heard of Grizzer's passing, his comment that he had known Grizzer for his entire life put things into perspective. This wolf has touched a lot of lives in his time here at the International Wolf Center, and many an educational moment was shared with him in the background. Our thoughts are with all of you who have shared Grizzer in one way or another, and to the Wolf Care staff who are committed to the best care possible for all of our ambassadors. Grizzer's howl was unique, and we certainly will miss it. The next set of clips that you'll see are the vet exam on the 26th to the decision that I made to euthanize Grizzer. This is challenging to watch. It can be very emotional for many of you to see the process, but I think it's important to understand. Many people have said, why did this happen so quickly? And he was up and active on Tuesday, so I wanted to share this with you. I certainly understand people may want to log off and not experience this, but I think it's very important for us to learn and to understand and to know that Grizzer was cared for to the end. We started with regular wolf care. Something just didn't seem right. We brought him into the building. We gave him a light sedative. We started an IV fluid. We thought it might have been cold because that day was again cold, but Grizzer's temp was normal. We got blood work. His kidney values were within normal range, his liver values within normal range. So the things that would cause an older animal to decline just weren't that apparent. So instead of having him sedated for a longer period of time while we were waiting for test results and trying to come up with some options, we decided to bring the wolf care team in. We know Grizzer is a very socialized wolf, and we knew that he liked his people. And so keeping him calm and not having to sedate him in the building was very important to us. So the wolf care team stayed with him throughout the day. Again, very relaxed, but definitely very subdued. There was, clearly something that wasn't right. And so the decision was made to bring a portable x-ray machine to Grizzer rather than risk the drugging necessary to take him to the clinic. Again, ambient temperatures were very cold. He was very, very fragile. And so we wanted to see if there was anything in our previous experience with some of our decline where we had mast cell tumors. We had, with Denali, a mass that had ruptured on his liver, things that we hopefully could try to identify and see if there was some indication of what was going on. So we're grateful to the Vermilion Community College Vet Tech program, allowing one of their technicians to come up with our vet and get chest x-rays, get abdominal x-rays, and differing from some of our other older animal declines, there wasn't any sign of a mass. There wasn't anything that would indicate that this was the issues that we had seen in the past. So he wanted to go back out. Certainly that wasn't in his best interest, so we tried to keep him occupied, try to keep him again calm. And you'll notice that every time that we do something with the vet, we do hood him, meaning that we have a muzzle but also an eyepiece that helps calm him down so that we don't have to use as much anesthesia in order to be able to accomplish some of the things that we need. But clearly it was not the Grizzer that we had seen in the last couple of days. And so there was still something that was, uncertain. Course of action at this time was antibiotics in case there was something bacterial, although his blood work didn't identify that. As I said, his body temp was within normal range, so it wasn't something that was really an indication of weather-related, ambient temperature-related, which you might expect in wintertime. Just something wasn't right. And so the wolf care staff, again, our role here is to keep him comfortable, to allow him to be as relaxed as possible, to not be anxious about being in confinement. Wolves don't like confinement, including old wolves like Grizzer, are cautious about being held, and he wanted to get back out to the outer area, but again, with a compromised condition, we certainly didn't want to have him out in the cold. So keeping him in the building was our priority. But we also knew that at some point he just needed rest, and we looked to him to tell us when is enough and when do you want some quiet time. And he was good about communicating that. One thing about working with socialized wolves is you get to know their looks, you get to know their personalities, you get to know their attitude, you get to know when is enough. And he was giving us the message there that he wanted some time. He needed some time on his own. So we cleared out the wolf care staff, and I stayed in the lab, be able to watch him on camera, let him rest. He really rested quite comfortably through the night. But again, we were noticing that he was having an increasing problem with breathing. You could see that he wasn't taking full breaths, and even though there was nothing indicated on the chest x-rays, something wasn't right as far as his ability to get oxygen. And so the night was pretty calm, but by the next morning, he gave us some glimmers of hope. There was no doubt. He had breakfast. He took some morning meds. He seemed like he was doing better, but it was short-lived. Within the hour, his body had continued to decline. At the end of his life, we had the honor to witness his strength, trust, and social bonding with his Wolf Care team members. As a curator, I had the responsibility to honor his incredible life with the gift of peace. We are better team members to have experienced all those lessons and memories, to be with us for generations to come. Grizzer has been cremated and will be joining Shadow, Malik, Maya, Aiden, and Denali for their final resting place.
One of the more challenging losses that we've had here. It was unexpected, and there's no doubt that we weren't prepared for it. You'd think you'd be prepared at 17 and a half years, but we certainly weren't. Out of all the wolves here, he handled the cold better than anybody. He had a thickest coat. He had, he had a great disposition. He had breakfast in the building every day. He did tremendously well. And as we found out from the necropsy, this wasn't cold. This wasn't an illness. This was just a body that gave out, and a heart that was unable to do what a heart needed to do. And again, no confirmation. I mean, nothing's 100% certain, but we don't know, again, cause and effect, if something happened or if this was just an aging heart condition. But he was active to the end. There's no doubt. So with that, I don't know where the exhibit pack is. Chances are they're up in the woods. There they are. Here they come. So with that, and Abby, unless there's any other questions that I need to address, I think I'll be logging off. And if you want to watch our cameras, they're still going to be active. We still are now getting daylight till almost like 5:30 at night. So you get some good opportunities for daylight. Oh yeah, the one thing I forgot to mention is that we have an auction coming up. I am wearing a cowl that I won in the auction last year. It's actually of Grizzer hair. So our Wolf Care auction will be starting on March 1st. There is shed hair that's been spun up by our artisans of Grizzer and Denali, as well as many, many other things. So if you're interested in donating to the auction, please let us know. If you are interested in bidding on auction items, please let us know as well. And one last plug, Jess Edberg, who's done Wolf Care with us and was here that day with many of the other staff, is the executive director of the Dorothy Moulter Museum, and they just started their webinar, or sorry, their auction today. So again, my fellow Wolf Care team members have a lot of diversity in things that they do. And if you get a chance, log in to the Dorothy Moulter Museum and check out their auction in honor of Jess's commitment to our ambassador wolves. So that's all I have. And anything else, Abby?
I don't think so. Just a lot of support from everyone for all the Wolf Care staff and all that they've done for Grizzer. So thank you all so much for all of that.
Thank you. And it looks like Rika's on the move. All right. Have a good evening.